Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Let's just take a moment to arrive. Just feel yourself here in your body in this moment. Anything that happened before can set aside. Anything that's happening afterwards is not here yet. We are just here. Just breathe in some nice teal light from this communication that's about to happen. So today I really wanted to talk about bridging the gap between dreaming energy, between organizing energy and executing energy, because we're coming into a full moon this week. We're coming into execution. And this is, I find, one of the hardest leaps to make. We often get stuck in that kind of DO rut where we over and over again come up with a new shiny idea. We're super excited about it. We go down the rabbit hole on it. We maybe even create an outline for it. We do mind maps, we get all excited about this idea. And then a new shiny idea comes along and we don't actually execute on any idea. And we don't end up actually generating anything or creating anything physical. And so how to bridge that gap between the idea space and the physical space can be really tricky. So I have some ideas today that I wanted to share. But first, does that resonate with anyone? Can either of you here resonate with getting stuck in the DO rut? Or is it just me?
I mean, that's most of, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
That's most of me. Neat ideas, but they don't end up going places.
Right. And I hear that
No, you go ahead.
I hear that from so many innovators, is all I was going to say. So common.
I tend to be kind of I don't know, I fluctuate, but mostly it's like I get one idea and I want to complete it. I get stuck along the way different ways. But I have so many ideas now that I'm kind of being okay with the idea. Okay, well, that's going to get to this point right now because it's not calling to me. So I'm learning that. So it's mostly like straight kill it dead, and then I can move on to the other thing. That's my experience.
All right, excellent. And the other thing is, like you said, we all go through kind of phases and cycles, and sometimes we get stuck in that DO, and sometimes we're stuck in the ER, and sometimes we're just stuck like at random points along the way. But if you are listening to this or watching this and thinking, yes, that is me right now. I have this great idea and I don't know how to actually manifest on this idea. I don't know how to generate on it. You are in the right place. This is what we're doing today. So I want to show you, this is my beautiful chart here. We've all seen now. These are the 8 8s. And so one thing you can do is when you're stuck in one portion of the cycle, you can look at the opposite energy, and that will really help you to unblock whatever is going on. So here's the thing, when you are in the, it's backwards so I can't see it. So when you're in the innovate part of the cycle, so you're trying to get down here to generate, right? But you're in that innovate part of the cycle where you are mind mapping and outlining and getting, just going down the rabbit hole in this idea, thinking about how does this idea apply to me? How does this idea apply to my audience? I've got this cool idea. How does it connect to all the other things that I'm working on and so forth? That's the innovate space. And so if you look across from the innovate energy, the opposite energy is celebrate. And so the beauty of this is this gives us a hint as to how we can actually get from innovate down to generate. And the trick is that we need to set really small little goals and celebrate after each one. So for example, if you are trying to write something, I know we have a lot of writers in this group. If you are trying to write something, set yourself a really, really doable goal. For example, set a timer for 15 minutes and write for 15 minutes. You can spare 15 minutes of your life and you can write something, anything for 15 minutes, right? So that's one thing you can do, and then just celebrate. I did it. I wrote for 15 minutes. I have something on this topic, okay? It may not be usable, but it's something, it's a place to start. And so you can celebrate that small step. If you are looking at a bigger project, so for example, my mother, who I love, but man, oh man, it's hard to live with her. She thankfully is elsewhere for this entire summer. She got a job for this summer, which is wonderful and amazing. And she's working on that job this summer. And so I have the opportunity to reorganize some of the house, which is something I've been wanting to do for a long time. And so the kitchen, for example, I have been reorganizing the entire kitchen, but it's a lot and I get very overwhelmed very easily. And so I've had to set very small goals and then celebrate those. So for example, my next goal is I want to reorganize the spices. That's the next thing. I want a better organization system for the spices. And I'm going to, once I do that, I'm going to take the rest of the day off and celebrate. I might even have a bonfire out in the back for that one. But it's just setting those little teeny tiny goals and celebrating them. That is what is going to help you get into that generate mode. A few other ideas that I have that work really well for me in getting into the generate space and kind of kickstarting the O and the E energy, which is the execute energy, getting from O to E, sorry. 3 of my favorites. One is the walk and talk or the scribble and babble. They work equally well, I find. So the trick to this is to either get somebody to go for a walk with you and just talk to them about this idea. Because once you actually talk it out with someone, often you find kind of the kernel of like, oh, this is what I'm trying to do here. This is what I'm trying to say here. This is what needs to actually happen here. So especially if you're a writer, this is a great way to kind of get something created. You can actually record yourself talking about this. Even if you don't have someone to talk to about it, this is a great way to do it. You just have your phone, put your little auto transcription app or whatever recording device you use, and just talk straight into it as you're going for a walk. Nobody will think you're crazy because people talk to their phones all the time. It's a totally normal thing to see someone talking to a phone by themselves. So that's one thing. Another thing I love to do is what I call the scribble and babble. And so this is just a simple thing where I take a notebook and a pen and I literally just scribble randomly as I talk. And that again, somehow just like tricks my brain into not tripping myself up and not getting caught up in like, am I doing this right? Okay. So you can also bounce a ball. There's all kinds of like simple physical stuff you can do. Knitting, if you're a knitter, anything that doesn't take a lot of brain power that you can do physically will help you kind of get out of your own way so that you can get to the heart of what you're trying to say or what you're trying to create. And you can actually just have, like I said, if you're talking into a phone, if you're talking into a transcription app, you already have something written that then you can iterate on, then you can share with someone, and then you can revise. So that's one thing. The next thing is what I call creative constraints. Now, creative constraints is something that I actually learned back in graduate school when I was in an amazing playwriting class with Naomi Izuka. She always talked about Paula Vogel. Paula Vogel's a playwright, and what Paula Vogel does to write all of her plays is basically invites a bunch of people over and then has what she calls a bake-off, a play bake-off. So for 48 hours, she gives everyone kind of rules or constraints, like 3 things that have to be included or cannot be included in this play. She gives them these kind of ingredients for this, the play they're baking. And then they all go off and write something in 48 hours. And so that forces a product. Now, is that play going to be produced as is? Very unlikely, but it gives you, again, a place to start, something to start from, something to work with. And so a great way to get your creative juices flowing is to give yourself constraints, give yourself some rules, like it's a game, okay? When you're doing this with kids especially, you'll see that like if you say to a kid, hey, tell me a story. They'll just stare at you blankly. Like, tell you a story about what? But if you say, tell me a story about a dog, well, they will come up with 5 stories immediately because they know lots of stories about dogs, right? The same is true for us as adults. When we try to think of like anything, we can't think of anything. We cannot think of a single thing unless you give us a specific thing to think of and about. So giving yourself those constraints can be a great way to create something. Those constraints can be time constraints. Like, for example, if you want to come up with a kind of TED style talk, you know that it has to be 18 minutes or less. I recommend actually that you go even narrower. Try writing something like the smallest kernel of what you're trying to create. Give yourself 8 minutes. Write an 8-minute talk. If you can write an 8-minute talk, you can make an 18-minute talk out of that. If you can write 3 pages, then you can stretch that into something else. But you have to kind of start with like the smallest kernel of what you're trying to create here. And that will really help you to expand on it. One of the games that I like to play is what I call ABC. And again, it sounds really silly. It's basically a childhood game, but it works incredibly well to get your creative juices flowing. And how it works is simply that you write, every sentence that you write starts with the letter of each letter of the alphabet in turn. So the first sentence starts with A, the second sentence starts with B, and so on. So you have basically 24 sentences. And it will really help you, like force you to figure out like, okay, how am I going to do this? How am I going to, fit what I need to say into this structure, into this format? Will you keep it in that structure? Absolutely not. It's very silly, but it can really help you unblock this block of like, it has to be good, it has to be perfect, it has to sound right. No, it doesn't. It has to start with A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And so it gets you out of that perfectionist mindset and into just creating. So what I would love to do, if you are game, if you are up for it, is to actually do an ABC little writing workshop here and see what we come up with. So I would love for you both to come up with something that you are thinking about or wanting to write about. If you are already involved in a project, this could be a scene from the project. For example, my daughter just did a playwriting class. And so she did this as an exercise with her 2 characters, that they had a scene together and it had to go A, B, C, D, E, F, and so forth. So what do you think you're gonna use for this, my friends?
Just because it's at the front of my head right now, it's my grandmother's story.
Love it. That's great. And Greg?
Honestly, I have no idea. I also missed, was this each, as in a conversation, each sentence starts with the next letter, or is it just the sentences that can be description and prose?
It could be description and prose.
But
it
yeah,
doesn't have to be dialogue.
Yeah, I have no idea right now because I don't want to force the current story I'm in into this, or any of the ones I want into this thing. So I have no idea right now.
Okay, fair enough. Well, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm actually working on a kind of TED style talk. And so I'm just going to think about the topic that I'm going to be working on for that and just see what comes out of that. So maybe you can just come up with a topic that you're interested in or thinking about lately.
Yeah, I'll come up with something to write about.
You can also just start writing and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm going to pause the recording so it's not super boring watching us write. And then we can come back together in about 10 minutes and see what we came up with. How's that sound? All righty.
Sounds good.
All right. So what did we learn from that experience? Did we love it, hate it, never going to do it again? Might use it for something?
I enjoyed that because it brought that sense of play when you're a little kid.
Yeah.
Just to see what was there. And I think for me, because it's about, my grandmother is like, she's a big figure in my life. I mean, she's like a force of nature for everyone in my family. So it's really nice to find a letter and think of like one attribute of her. Her name was Alpha. That's the first letter. That was pretty easy, right?
Perfect. I love that.
Yeah. And she was a brave woman to live the life that she did with her 11 children. So I loved it. It really sparked something.
Yeah, another thing you can do is if you're writing, for example, about a person, you can do the first letter in like each letter of their name.
Cool.
Just use it, it's a great way to just kind of like get a brainstorm going about ideas around this topic. Obviously, it's not going to be great prose. It's not going to be a good, dialogue, but it can be a great way to just trigger ideas like, oh, I hadn't even thought about that in this context, but because this letter's here, I've thought of this word and now I'm tying these two ideas together.
Yeah, there's definitely stuff that came up that I hadn't thought of using that word for it but yeah, I was more concerned about finding the word and actually, I like spoke a word and then talked about it. She was brave. Why? And I said a bunch of stuff about that. And she had courage and why. So yeah, this was fun.
Cool.
Definitely.
Yeah, I would be interested to see, if you did like the letters of her name, what comes up there too. Just a good way to kind of get your brain noodling on something. What about you, Greg?
So I ended up deciding to write because it's been on my mind about the fact that I caught COVID on Monday. And so wrote about that. And what was interesting was I was trying to do sort of two things. One was not only the exercise, but I was also trying to make it so that as much as possible, if you were to read this, you might not notice what I was doing. And so I was working hard to, at least in portions of it, have the sentences flow smoothly. Don't know if I succeeded at all. But what was also interesting, and once I hit about K, life started becoming a lot easier.
Yeah.
But the other interesting thing is it did force me to think about and approach the whole experience from different directions and take things that I knew already, but still revisit them and look at them a little bit differently, which was kind of nice.
Excellent. Yeah, for me, it was very interesting. So I just talked, like I said, I kind of went off on a tangent of like the ideas that I want to explore for this kind of TED style talk. And it was a little bit all over the place, as it would be, because, I'm jumping from thing to thing, but it did remind me of like, oh, I want to tie this and I want to tie this and all the different ideas that I want to make sure I get in there somewhere. So that was pretty interesting and helpful, I would say. I got, pretty creative near the end with like XYZ. But again, it's fun, it's a fun game. And I think Frances, really, you hit the nail on the head there, that it just gets us into a playful mindset, which is so important. In the organizing space, we can sometimes really get up in our head and get locked up into this like, okay, and now it has to be like this, and it's linear, and it's, this ties into this, and this connects with this. And we forget to have that playful attitude. And the play is really what's going to pull you into that generation space. You have to be in a playful mindset to kind of be creative and channel ideas. So yeah, anything you can do that's a fun game for you is a great idea at this time. If you have ideas around fun games that have helped you in the past or that you think might be helpful, I'd love to hear them. If you don't think of them now, feel free to, add those later in the Innovator Skills. We can kind of start a discussion around that, around fun games to play to get you out of organizing and into executing. Does anything come to mind right now? Things that you've tried or would like to try?
I know that for me, like Oracle cards and tarot cards, I do them for like kind of messages like, okay, what am I going to focus on today? But sometimes just looking at any picture or work of art sometimes will spark something. And those little cards are mini works of art. So
Yeah.
sometimes I'll pull a card before I start. It's kind of like my pre-game thing before I get started.
Yeah, I love pulling cards. Another thing I like to do is just play the random book game where I'll just like grab a random book on the shelf, open it to a random page and just read the first sentence I see. Or I'll pick a number, you know, and then find that page and read that sentence. That can be really helpful just to kind of like see what that kicks loose. Especially if you're just going to do a free write, that can be a great, like, just start with this sentence and see where that leads you. That's a great one too. Any others? All right. Well, if you think of them, like I said, please feel free to kind of add them in on the Innovators Guild. Try things out, try new games and just see what comes, see what works for you. And I would love to hear from those of you watching this after the fact, what you got out of this and games that you would like to try to help you get from that innovating energy into that generating energy. All right, my friends, that's all I have prepared for today. Is there anything else we want to talk about before we go? Anything on your minds? Questions, comments?
Well, the thing that sticks out for me, it feels kind of, you know, being stuck feels like you can't do anything, right? But it feels like if you play, even if it's not related to your topic remotely, that's just sort of frees something up.
Yes, just getting into a playful mindset. Even if you go and play hopscotch, I really don't care what it is. Just do something that's playful and fun, and that can help you get unstuck. Do something differently than you usually do. Sometimes I recommend, you know, people write with their other hand, you know, or draw a picture with their, you know, non-dominant hand. That can really help you just like shake something loose. It'll look terrible, right? But that's not the point. Hi, Katie. The point is just to get in that creative, playful frame of mind.
Like shake something loose.
Shake something loose, exactly. Because when you're stuck, like you said, it just feels like there's no movement. And so anything you can do to shake it loose and just get some movement is a good thing.
Cool.
Yep. Thank you, my friends. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and I will see you next week. Mwah! Enjoy that
next week.
Full moon energy coming in.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.